are all asking me to do. Okay, the session is being recorded online. So for those of you who are here physically, remember that doesn't stop you from accessing these recordings later. That's the whole point. We're recording not just with online people, but also if you want to refer to this again at a later stage, you can always go back to it. And hopefully you all know how to access the recordings. Okay, good. If not, remember there are guides that actually show you how to do so. Okay, so let me go to my slides here in front. Sorry, I just want to set everything up so that I have my slides on the side and my chat on the side as well, so I can see what the online people are saying if they have any comments or queries. Okay, remember online people, unfortunately I don't have the fancy earphones that Mr. Labia has, so you won't be able to speak up. What you can do is just type your questions in the chat and I'll be able to address your queries. Okay, so as we say, we had some questions that we wanted to ponder at the end of lecture 6. Specifically, how do we reset the program so we can add again? And the reason why this came up was because if you press the play button and you started the program, and you all remember what I'm talking about. You all remember what the program does. You all remember what the program does? Okay? The idea is that if you did run this program and you finish and you get the calculation and you try again, you could use the program, but it would give you the wrong answer. And you would pick up that the wrong answer is because you were adding whatever you were adding now in addition to what you added previously. Does this make sense? Okay. And so we would like to be able to reset the program so that we can start all over again, so that we can use this program as many times as possible without having to stop the program and press the play button again. Okay, you did realize that. The other way to keep playing the program is if you press stop, close the program, and start it all over again. Because if you do that, the values reset to 0. All right. So, is there a way to do this besides pressing the stop button and then starting all over again? Imagine with a calculator. So on your calculator, you go 5 plus 2 and then you get a sum, but then you would have to close the program and then start the calculator again. Is that effective? No, because probably you want to keep using the calculator over and over again. That's the equivalent of if you had a physical calculator and every time you wanted to calculate something new, you would have to take this calculator, put it back into your pocket, wait a while, and then take it out and then go, okay, I can use it again. Not cool, right? You want to be able to use it as many times as possible without doing so. Second question I want to ask is, are there other ways to check if we can add more numbers? All right? Remember that is, the program has a check in place to see, are you allowed to keep adding numbers? Or, I'm sorry, you've added enough numbers, so stop. Okay, and the way we did it was different. And you were online last week and you actually heard me say there are ways to do it. In fact, one of the students physically from group A last week said, well, why can't we use, if the number is greater than 0, that also works and makes sense. Does this make sense? Right. Is there a more elegant way to check than the way I've done it? Well, obviously. There's definitely ways to do it. Last week, I did the tutorial. I did all of the tutorials with you. And those of you who were in the Tuesday tutorial, you know who you are. I was asking all those questions and going, what if you tried this? What if you tried that? Right? And then eventually I uploaded the source code and said, here's an answer. Now, those people who attended the Thursday tutorial and the people who attended the Friday tutorial, I gave you completely different ways of solving that exact same problem. And the whole point is there are different ways to do it. So for those of you on Tuesday who are like, oh, how did that go? Go and check the recordings, even if it's like scroll away to the end of the video and check what did the code look like for Thursday and look what did the code look like on Friday, you will see that the idea is they all solved the same problem, but the approach was different. And it's really important that you gain that mastery of saying, you know what? I can do it anyway. Some will be less effective than others, but that's the point. If you become more experienced, you will eventually be very comfortable with knowing how to do the same problem in different ways. That's the whole point of problem solving. Are you in the wrong class? Then why are you leaving? Okay. Right. So, can I keep track of how many numbers I've added up so far? Now, the reason why I asked this question is if you take a look at the program I've implemented and provided the code for in Lecture 6, you'll notice that it could go better in terms of the information to prompt the user. In other words, how do you guide your user with entering the information into the program? Imagine you told the program, I'd like to add 100 numbers. Are you going to sit there the whole time and enter all 100 numbers in one go? Or are you going to enter a few and then realize, oopsie, I need to go to the bathroom? Or, oopsie, my friends WhatsApp me, so let me respond. Ha ha ha. Good joke, right? Put your phone down, go back to your program and go, which number was I on? I can't remember. Now what? Start all over again, sorry. And it turns out the answer was you were on number 89 of 90. Right, see what I'm saying? So you would like to be able to tell the person, hey, please enter number 89. And then they go, 89. You look at the list and say, 89 is this number, I need to put this in. Okay, you see what I'm getting at? Is this compulsory? Do you have to put this in? No, not really, not for 1A. But would it be nice? Yes. Would you want, if you were the user, would you like to have this experience? Absolutely. Okay, and when does this become important? When does it become so important that you've got to provide a good user experience to your user? Informatics 3 is going to be super, super important. It is so competitive in Informatics 3 that people will spend hours and hours on end arguing with each other in teams, going, I don't like that shade of blue. You all go, whoa, are we going to go there? Yes. Why? Because that shade of blue makes the font not clear. And that's going to be important. When the judges come and evaluate projects, and these are outside judges, these are people who may be your future employers. They're going to look at your project and go, and then they're going to look at the other project and and they go, we like that design more, and then they're going to win. It's a lot of money. And you get to put on your CV, came first, out of. And this year I think there's 50-something teams. That's very competitive. Can you imagine? Came second because my color scheme was not great. But it happens. So get used to the idea of making the experience as good for your users as possible. Get into that habit now. All right. Will it need more work from you? Oh, yes. Should you do it for your semester test? Nobody's going to give you extra marks for doing it. But you are helping yourself. Of course, not everyone here is going to do that, and it's fine. Because maybe some of you will struggle and you'll be like, oh, I just wanted to not crash. That's also fine. But you can imagine someone marking this and you're like, oh, I'm going to mark 350 student projects. But once in a while, you see this one project and it's so nice to use because the instructions are clear. I'll be like, oh, I like this project. Mark, mark. Tick, 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 tick. More ticks, more marks. That's reality. That's going to happen. All right, so keep that in mind. Then the last question, if I had 100 numbers to add up, would I really have to click on the button 100 times? And the answer is yes, you would have to. Who would like to click on the button 100 times? Now the online people will be like, not me. You also be, not me. Ideally, you want to press the button once and it will do it for you automatically. All right, so how do we do that? Right, so the reset, we have gone through it, but I'm just going to go through it and help you recap again. So why do you want to reset? Well, if you click on the first button, it allows you to set the number of numbers to add to the sum. All right, so that's effectively you setting up the program and saying, hello program, I want you to prepare yourself so that you are able to allow the user to specify how many numbers to add up. And you monitor this user so they only add so many numbers. If they say 10, only allow 10. If they say 100, then you must allow for 100. However, you will notice that if you use this program again and again and again, that sum does not reset itself. And so the shortest and quickest and easiest way to solve this problem is that in your code for where you set, the user says, I want to add so many numbers, you initialize the sum to 0 in that same button. Does this make sense? Okay, now I've got someone shaking their head. Think of it this way. Right now, there are how many places where we can write code? 2 places, right? 1 under each button. Does this make sense? Okay. So I'm saying you need to initialize sum to 0 in the space where you specify how many numbers you want to add. Okay? The alternative at this point is maybe we can initialize sum to 0 in the other button. This one. The button that checks to see how many numbers have you added so far. Right? Why would it be a bad idea to initialize my sum to 0 in the second button where I am checking, can I add this number? And if I can, add to the sum here. Any ideas as to why we shouldn't initialize sum here, but it should actually be in the other button where we say, how many numbers do you want me to add up? And then you go, 3 numbers to add up. I go, okay, while I'm busy setting up the program so that it only accepts 3 numbers, I'm also going to set the sum to 0. Why should it be there and not when I click on the button, the second button, set the sum to 0? Yes?
Then the user will go into the first number. And then if you set it to 0, then the first number will be counted.
Right. So every time you click the second button, how many times are you going to click that button? It depends on how many times you want to add a number, right? Would it make sense for me to do the following? So you're the one that shook your head. So think about it this way. So first button I press, I say, I want to add 3 numbers together, okay? Now, obviously, I'm going to have to press the second button how many times? 3 times, right? Because every time I click on that button, I'm saying, please put the number I've typed in the text box and add it to my sum. But if I initialize sum to 0 inside that code of the second button, it would mean I reset the sum to 0 every time. So in other words, when I press the second button, what's the sum? 0. Okay, give me a number, you say 10. So I add 10 to sum, it's fine, it's 10. Then I press the button a second time, but now I put 10 again, right? Put 10 in the second text box, press add again, and it goes, change sum to 0. Do I want to do that? No. So where do I want to set sum to 0? In the other button, because I'm saying I want to start a brand new calculation, it's going to add so many numbers together, and please initialize the sum to 0 because sum starts at 0, and whatever we throw into that sum, we are going to get the big sum in the end. Does this make sense? So placing where you initialize a value is extremely, extremely important. Okay, and for some of you see, you're willing to go, yeah, I'm willing to answer this. There are a number of you sitting here who are sitting there, well, I don't know what the answer is, I'm not even going to try answer it. And it's really not a good idea to sit passively. It's okay for you to sit and go, I'll give it a try, I think the answer is this, and it could be completely wrong. But the idea is try and think about it, and if you're really not sure, should you wait until the next lecture to find out? So I ask a question, I say, think about it, I'll answer next week. Should you go, oh, okay, I'll wait till next week. You can tell me then. Go and try it out. You know what will happen if you try this code out in VB? Your computer's not going to go, oh, how dare you? I'm going to blow up now. It's not going to do that. All it's going to do is go, what were you doing? It's wrong. Right? That's the nice thing about computers. It's not like engineering. You build a bridge wrong, it collapses. If you write the code wrong here on your little computer right now, squiggly red line, or, oh no, my program crashed. Worst case scenario, you've got to restart your computer. But nothing fatal. Make those mistakes now. Don't wait until, hello, we'd like you to write a program for our airplane, and then make those mistakes. All right. Okay, and there's some online people who answered. Yes, well done. Your answers are correct. Great. Okay, now the other thing is another approach that you could have used, that was to answer the second question, is that obviously I find how many numbers there are. All right. And then on top of a sum, also initialize a counter to 0. In other words, I'll declare an additional variable called counter. And the whole point of counter is it's going to be used to keep track of how many numbers I add up each time. So last week, when I went through the solution there was I asked you how many numbers, and I stored that number in a variable called numbers, something like that, num numbers. And each time I pressed the button, I would subtract 1 from num numbers so that eventually counted down to 0. And if it hit 0, I would then know that we've reached all the numbers we've input, and you can no longer enter anything anymore. But another approach is to use a counter, and in this case, so we leave num numbers alone. All right? So if you say how many numbers do you want to read in, and you go, I want to read in 100, that 100 stays 100 throughout the whole program. What I then do is I have a separate variable, and this separate variable keeps track, starts at 0, and every time I press the button, it increments that number by 1 to go, oh, you've read in 1 number, you've read in 2 numbers, you've read in 3 numbers, 4, 5, 6. And you use that 4, 5, 6 until you go, you keep allowing this until they match. Right? Because when you count, you're not going to go 1, 2, skip a 3. Right? You're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way until you match your counter to your number of numbers. When that happens, it means you've read all the numbers, the end. Now, why would I want to use the counter variable instead? Because, as you can see here, I haven't done it yet, but you can already, oh yes, but you can already see we're starting something that will allow us to do this. Okay, so this code here is pretty much the same as the previous one. I've just explained that the number increments each time until you get a match and you stop. But the reason why I use the counter is for this reason. Let me get my laser pointer. There. There. What I'm doing is I'm specifying, making use of the counter to keep track of which number is next. Does this make sense? Online people, physical people are looking at me very blankly. Okay, all right. Let's look at this. We all know counter keeps track of how many times you've read a number. Does this make sense? Okay, so what I'm doing is I go, if counter is less than numbers, then what does that mean? If counter is less than the number of numbers, it means that I still have more numbers I can add. Does this make sense? Right, and if that's the case, the number is equal to, and it's like, okay, I can still add more numbers. I'm going to take the number you put in the text box. I'm going to fetch it, store it in the variable number. I'm going to add that number to my sum. And then I'm going to add my counter 1 by 1. So I'm incrementing my counter by 1 to indicate I've added yet another number to the counter. Okay. And then I've got an if statement that says if counter is equal to numbers, in other words, we've got a match, all right? Then I know that I must display my sum because I have entered everything I need to add. However, if that's not the case, and remember we won't skip a number here, so we know that it will eventually get to a point where we will either reach a sum or actually we should specify the next number that needs to be entered. Does this make sense? All right. So I think this next is actually wrong. I should actually have said counter plus 1 here. We're going to go next. What this message should actually say is the number blah blah has just been captured because you've just entered the number for the current number. Does this make sense? But the idea is it gives you an idea of where you are when you're entering numbers. Does this make sense? Okay, now this sentence here, this statement here, txt prompt answer.text is equal to number ampersand C string counter ampersand next, which should be next, should be number just captured, number 1 just captured, number 2 just captured, number 3 just captured, all right? And I mentioned this to the students on Tuesday's tutorial, but I don't think I covered it on Thursday or on Friday. So what this is, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call string concatenation. Big word, I know, but what it really means is you are just sticking strings together to form one big string. But nobody wants to say that, you know, when can you imagine telling your client, oh, I'm just putting 2 strings together. You go, oh, that sounds easy. But you go, oh, listen, yeah, I've got to concatenate 2 strings, man. Then you're like, well, you're the professional. I'm going to step back just in case this is like really difficult work. Okay? So string concatenation means simply you putting 3, in this case, we are putting 3 separate strings together to form one string. Can you see that? Can you see it's 3 separate strings? First string is number, the second string is next, and that third string is when you take counter and you C-string it. So in other words, you convert counter to a string. You're taking 3 strings and combining it into one string. Now there is a comment online that's asking, can we use the plus sign instead of the ampersand sign? Yes, you can. In VB, that's possible. VB is not very strict with the syntax. They will allow you to use the plus sign if you really want. I'm not so much a fan of using the plus sign. And the reason for that is I feel that these are strings. The plus sign is for numbers, man. Okay? But nobody's going to tell you, oh, how dare you use a plus sign, you're going to lose marks. Okay, what we will question, however, ladies and gentlemen, if you use it inconsistently. Does this make sense? So sometimes in that exact same program, you go, oh, I want to use a plus sign. And then like 30 lines down, you go, oh, I want to use an ampersand. Or in the same sentence, go ampersand and plus because I want to show off. We will take off marks. Thank you, Mr. Show Off. Right, be consistent. Okay. Right. That answers your question. Okay. Yes, so B. Leach is asking, so can you use plus for sums and ampersand for strings? Yes, I prefer that. I prefer that very much, but I'm not going to dictate to you that you can't use. Okay, but you can't use ampersand for numbers, obviously. I hope you realize that. Okay, then another input mechanism. I want to introduce to you the input box today. Now, the input box is effectively like a pop-up. You all know what a pop-up box is. So you're working on the internet and then pop, pops up a normally very questionable advertisement sort of thing, depending on what site you visit. Right? Okay? And sometimes, congratulations, you are a winner. Please fill this for me. Meanwhile, it's trying to scam you. Pretty much that, an input box. Okay. So an input box is another way for you to insert information and give it back to the program. So instead of a text box, you would use an input box. When do you use an input box? When do you use a text box? The answer is for Informatics 1A and Informatics 1B, you will try and use input boxes as much as possible because it makes it easy for us to mark it. Okay. But once you graduate from Informatics 1B, you pretend that you never knew input boxes. Okay? If input box saw you on the street and go, hey, you were like, no, don't know you. All right? Because if you use input boxes in your third year project, people will laugh and point at you. If you go for your job interview and you go, check my program, it's got input boxes, you will not be hired. I am looking at you all very seriously. Online people, you know what I mean. Input boxes suck. But they make it so easy for us to mark, especially when we're marking 350 assignments in one go. So you use input boxes. How do you use input boxes? Well, instead of having a text box that you drag and drop onto your form, in your code, you actually type in input box, open bracket, and there you specify the prompt, and that's effectively the label for that text box that pops up. Please try it out. Okay, then you know what I'm talking about. It's like, you know, the Matrix. You go, I can't tell you about it. You know, you will have to see it for yourselves. Right. Now, input boxes are like text boxes in the sense that they return a string. And because they return a string, you'll see that I use cint there because I need to convert the resulting input that the user provides back into an integer for my variable to store it. Okay. The question there is, do we name input boxes? No, you do not name input boxes, but an input box will always be on the right of an equal sign, always on the right. You never, ever, ever have an input box on the left of an equal sign because it's always used for input. In other words, the user provides data to your variable on the left. When you go, can you name input boxes? Suppose naming in the sense that you put a caption by the input box. Okay. Because if you can see here, I go how many numbers to add up, that gives you a very descriptive instruction of, hey user, in this box here, where I want you to type information for how many numbers do you want to add up. All right. Okay. Another question is, can we use input boxes for Prac 3? Is it compulsory for Prac 3? I honestly don't know. Mr. Labier probably would have given you information or instructions. If he didn't specify that you can't, we are teaching you, so you're welcome to use it. It's really good practice to try it out, okay? Anyway, so let's consider how we would use input boxes in our problem. So over here, you will see that, and please note, these input boxes replace the text boxes that we were using. So you don't put text boxes on your form at the same time as you would have input boxes. You can have a combination, but you're not going to go, hello, what is your name in the text box with a text box on your form, and then when I press the button, an input box goes, hello, what is your name? That defeats the purpose. Okay. Right. So if the counter is less than numbers, this is like the old stuff, you know. Counter is equal to counter plus 1. Number is equal to sin, input box, add number, and here I go C string counter. So you see what's happening here. I increment the counter before I ask for the number, so that, remember, counter starts at 0. So when I press this button for the first time, counter gets incremented from 0 to 1, and then an input box pops up and says, add number 1. Does this make sense? You go, oh, I must add number 1, and then you type an enter number, and you press enter, and it adds that number to your sum. Okay. So that's pretty much what's happening there. But I also want to show you this new line of code I've got here. Message box, enter number, and C string number next. All right. Technically, I should have incremented the counter again here. So not a good prompt here. This is very confusing because you've just added number 1, and I go, enter number 1 next. It should be enter number 2 next. So I should increment the counter by 1 over here. Does this make sense? Okay. All right. Now, message box. What do you think message box is? Anyone want to guess? So we taught you input box. Input box is a pop-up that allows a user to type something in for input. Okay. Who wants to guess what a message box is? Right. It's a pop-up message which gives you a message. That's effectively it. Right. And do you think a message box is used for input? Do you think it's used for output? It's used more for output, right? However, having said that, it was a trick question, really. You don't really use message boxes for output in Informatics 1A or 1B. You use message boxes for prompting your user to do things. So you might want to alert your user and say, you're done, or game over, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Your outputs are normally calculated and displayed to a text box or to a grid, which we will show you later on. Right. Don't calculate an answer and display it to a message box. Why not? How many of you would be happy if you ran a program, so in other words, you added a whole bunch of numbers together. So let's say you added 100 numbers together, and you finally get a sum and the message pops up as a message box. You press OK, and then you can't get that answer again because it was just a message. Would it not be nicer for a message box to just go, thank you, you've added all your numbers, okay, and then on your form itself, there's a text box that shows you the sum is the sum of all your numbers. So it's all to do with style and, making sure your user doesn't have to go, oh, man, you mean I got to add those 100 numbers again just to know what the sum is? That's going to be bad. All right, so keep that in mind. All right. Now next time, which is Wednesday, our questions for today, what we answer is how do we reset the program so we can add again by initializing the sum to 0 in the first button. Second thing is, are there any other ways to check if we can add more numbers? We know this already. Is there a more elegant way to check? That's kind of like, duh, if we can answer, are there other ways to check it? Yes. We can use a counter, and then can we keep track of how many numbers I've added so far? You use the counter to keep track. Then this last question, we haven't really added it, and that is, if I had 100 numbers to add up, would I really have to click on the button 100 times? Yes, you do with an if statement, however, not if you make use of repetition instead. Which leads us to the while loop, which we will introduce to you on Wednesday. Yes, and all of you are like, you've been saying you're going to introduce the while loop for a while now. Well, we mean it for real this time. But, you know, it's kind of like a joke, you know. We're repeating that we are going to teach you repetition. Right? Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy week 4. All right, we're getting there. Once we have a while loop, you will be able to solve everything. Even if it's not elegantly, you can solve everything. Online people, good day. Enjoy. I am going to remember to hit the stop recording button as well, because otherwise you won't